All right, hello and welcome to another Expert Insight interview. My name is John Golden from Sales Pop, online sales magazine, and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined from Washington, D.C. by Vincent Wanga. How you doing, Vincent?
I'm doing all right, John. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and Vincent's a dynamic international design thought leader, creative keynote speaker, award winning creative and executive author of The Art of Direction, serial entrepreneur, and experienced brand consultant with an exceptional range of expertise over a distinguished 2 decade career. You also oversaw brand strategy and creative during an unprecedented company growth from pre-Series A to over $1 billion in unicorn valuation. So we're going to talk today about the role of creatives and how, for a lot of creatives, Vincent, it can sometimes seem like they're in an organization where you have sales and market, all of that. The creatives always seem to be a little bit to the side or detached, or maybe a kind of a breed of people that the rest of the company doesn't understand, and sometimes it can be hard for them to communicate their value.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you brought up that point because we're kind of this black box enigma where a lot of people know we're essential but don't know what we do. The interesting part is the things that I talk about is creative leadership. The people who
Mhm.
lead these creatives, we don't live in that black box. We live in the world with the sales leaders, with the marketing leaders, with the C-suite. We pitch to the board and we pitch to clients and stakeholders. So, particularly when you're dealing with creative leadership, you have to understand the nuances of the creative team that nobody understands,
Mhm.
but also you're representative of the business executives who are beholden to business goals and business metrics and sales metrics. And you have to be almost a conduit, like a translator between these
Mhm.
two groups to make sure they work efficiently and effectively. And I think that's what makes creative leadership particularly interesting and challenging, is managing that balance constantly.
Right. And do you find that a lot of creatives don't, or maybe people who would be great in leadership positions don't go after them because they sort of go along with being kind of isolated over here, or thinking, well, that's a whole other skill set that I don't have, or what are the, because it seems to me like in other areas, like people would just say, yeah, I'm really good at this and whatever, I like this, and I want to move up and I want to manage people or whatever. But with creatives, it sometimes is a little different.
Yeah, I think it's a little different, but I think this applies to anybody in any role. Leadership also is an enigma.
Mhm.
If you don't have a great example of what a great leader is, and they're grooming you for that position, it can seem like this intimidating step to take in one promotion. You could go from a highly skilled individual contributor, all of a sudden you're managing people. How do you manage people? That's a whole nother nuance of understanding people, being an empathetic leader, having those leadership traits, getting people organized. That again prevents a lot of people from wanting to proactively
Mhm.
take that step. I think another aspect is people think, leadership is just this great meritocracy where because I'm the best salesperson, I deserve to be the leader of salespeople.
Mhm.
And it doesn't quite work that way all the time. Just because you're a great intellectual doesn't mean you're a great teacher. So
Mhm.
leadership is a calling, and there's certain skills that you should definitely have in your possession, should that be an aspiration. That I think people think that their hard skills in their individual contributorship journey translate one to one, and it doesn't. So it's something you need to be prepared for. It's something you need to proactively advocate for, but also know what you're getting into because it is a different world, different responsibilities than individual contributor. And the last thing I'll say is you're also beholden to metrics now. You're not just judged on your delivery and execution. There's long-term metrics that, just like marketing and sales and everybody else, you are now beholden to, that really determine your longevity.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a really good point, because I feel like the reality of what leadership entails and the additional things that you'll have to do are things that you want to think seriously about. And also the point that you made earlier about, yeah, I mean, it's typical in sales organizations to promote the salesperson, the top salesperson into the sales leadership position. Rarely works out. um, because as you said, I mean, for a lot of reasons we don't need to go into now, but I think you're correct. Is if the creative person wants to go into a leadership position, they have to ask themselves some serious questions about the other parts, the parts that maybe they've never done before, the parts that maybe aren't that appealing to them.
Absolutely, and those parts are not always sexy,
Hmm.
and sometimes leadership is sold in a very sexy way that doesn't match its day-to-day reality. Um, Another aspect here is, again, you have to have this business mindset. You have
Yeah.
to understand the business. You have to understand what drives revenue. You have to understand the marketing funnel. You have to understand the sales team's needs when you're going on pitches and creating resources that help them do their job. And I think it's this duality between this creative conceptual brain, which made you an amazing
Mhm.
designer, and this analytical strategic mind that's going to make you an amazing leader from the business standpoint. And if you don't have that duality, that's okay. Leadership's not for everybody. Enjoy being an individual contributor. There's great ways to happiness and wealth without managing people. But if you do have those traits and you're decisive and you're empathetic and you're organized and you have these traits that naturally make you a good leader, it's something you might want to look into, but understand that you're going to have to learn new skills and think differently, and be that conduit and translation between groups that otherwise, without you, couldn't communicate.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. The is the why. You know, I mean, because I always say that to people when I used to have people come to me and they would say, I would say, "What do you want to do?" And they would say, "Oh, yeah, I want to move up. I want to manage people." My first question would be why. And I would say, like, say, why do you want to manage people? Do you know what managing people is really like? I mean, it sounds great and everything, but it's definitely something you need to go into with your eyes open. And I think, Vincent, part of the problem is that, as you said, I mean, not everybody's suited for it. And if you want to be an individual contributor, but you want to go on and have a great career, we don't do a good job of helping people develop their careers when they're individual contributors or highly skilled at something. We only seem to have one track, which is the management one.
I totally agree. And one thing I really emphasize in my book is, again, understand your purpose for entering leadership. Sometimes it's a thankless job, especially managing people. Like, you get all the
Mhm.
glory, but
Yeah.
all the responsibility and blame, and you just got to be prepared for that. And another thing I mentioned in my book is one of my favorite sayings is just leadership is not a gift for you. It's a sacrifice for other people. And I think people don't understand the burden of leadership, and you certainly should do so. But if you're an individual contributor, you're also very vital. We need the people to execute the work.
Mhm.
And again, you can have a very fruitful career under that path. But if you choose leadership, you should choose it for the right reasons. And it shouldn't just be a motivation of money and power, because the people that you're leading will know the difference and may not respond to that. You really have to operate with a certain amount of empathy and
Mhm.
effectivism in order to inspire them and lead them. And I think the other point I want to make is that what I found in my experience that make great leaders, besides some of the metrics that we've talked about, is that oftentimes you're in that position because of your experience. It's not just about talent, but
Yeah.
you're in that position because you've experienced so many different things and you're ready to be decisive and effective in your decisions based on the scenarios that we face that somebody otherwise might hesitate or make the wrong decision. So your experience also plays a huge factor here, and that's why we want steady hands in leadership positions and not
Mhm.
just the most talented person.
And I feel too like that the transition from a creative to a leadership position, to individual contributor, may be slightly difficult, more difficult than a lot of jobs, because let's face it, like creatives tend to work and be left alone a lot of the time, like to produce. A lot of people don't understand what they're doing, so they don't interfere with them. But now you're moving into a role where, as you say, you won't be just surrounded by creative people. You're going to have a lot of people from other departments interfering with everything you do. So I think that's a key consideration for somebody switching roles.
Absolutely. And when you're at the lower levels, you might only interact with creatives, and that's okay.
Mhm.
You can understand that world and their nuance, and that's great. But the higher up you go, the more diverse your team gets, right?
Mhm.
Imagine the CEO, you're managing a COO, a CFO, a
Mhm.
CTO. So the higher you go, you don't know what your team is going to be. You thought you were just the marketing manager. Now
Mhm.
you're the director of marketing and you're managing a creative team. and a marketing team and maybe some analysts or some
Mhm.
data viz, you don't know how diverse that team's going to get. So it's not just about the difficulty of creatives kind of ascending and understanding the business side, but also as you grow in any leadership position, you don't know if creatives are going to be integrated into your team and should understand the nuance of creatives, how we collaborate, how we think,
Mhm.
environments that we thrive in, the assignments, and how to organize us, because that might help you in your pursuits, the higher up you go in leadership. And that's something I want to emphasize is there's just duality of understanding that in my book I'm trying to help demystify.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important because a lot of people just they get promoted into positions. Companies never give them any training. They don't invest in them. And I always say, like, it won't wait around for a company to do it for you. Like, invest in yourself. Nobody cares about your career as much as you do. So you should be looking, if they're not going to, sorry about that, if they're not going to supply, if they're not going to give you training, if they're not going to give you the tools, then you need to go find them yourself.
Absolutely, and I think that's kind of a shame. You don't get a degree from Harvard in leadership
Hmm.
necessarily. You can get your MBA, but they're talking
Sure.
about running a business. So
Hmm.
these are things, unfortunately, we have to learn the hard way. And if it's not done the right way, we burn out and cast off leadership for the rest of our careers. And if it's done the right way, and we have a great mentor who prepares us for this, it could be a lifelong fulfilling journey, like it was for me. So really, it's also the responsibilities of effective leaders who exist now to prepare the next generation for leadership, show them, be transparent about your job, what it takes, so that they can understand the nuances of the next level. And if you're in those positions where you aspire to it, ask the right questions. Go to your leadership and ask if you can be in one of those meetings you're not supposed to be in, or if you could shadow them for a day, or pick their brain over a working lunch. Like, be proactive on both sides to help generate the next generation. And I think the right organizations that are healthy inspire that type of collaboration, because I always believe that, your job is to develop leaders. And as a leader, that should be almost your greatest achievement.
Hmm.
It's okay if those leaders develop and go somewhere else. That's also still a part of your legacy. And you should create a healthy environment where they don't want to leave, but your job is to also help them have the necessary skills to continue that forward, because you never know when you're going to get promoted or you're going to leave. And you don't want to
Yeah.
leave your organization in a hole because you were the only source of effective leadership, and in your absence, your house of cards collapse.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, you should always be developing people to replace you. That should always be at the top of at the top of your mind. And and I like what you also said about experience. Experience is a really important thing. I mean, especially because the world is has changed or is changing so much. The other thing that I think comes into it much more now is, as you said, like understanding all the business parts, but also technology is playing such a huge role in now that I think also as a stepping into a leadership position or whatever is really understanding the impact that technology can make both on your area and across the business.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about particularly creatives is, um, unlike other segments of the business, which are more, sometimes concerned with a steady ship, we are intentionally at the vanguard and cusp of
Mhm.
technology. We are at the bleeding edge by definition. So we often see these emerging technologies well in advance of the rest of the organization. We are defined by our innovation and by pushing that envelope.
Mhm.
So unfortunately, that's a double-edged sword, where things like AI and some of the
Yeah.
emerging technologies we're facing now, oftentimes are innovations and sometimes solutions in search of a problem that can cause all kinds of legal and ethical problems in your organization before those things can catch up. So we
Mhm.
have to be very judicious in our practice, especially as creatives. While we're pushing the envelope in innovation, we want to, one, make sure we're actually solving a problem. What was the organizational problem we're trying to solve with this technology? And not just doing it for technology's sake. And then two, making sure, again, we're not creating risks or reverberations or technical debt that other parts of the organizations will have to deal with long after we're moving on to the next thing. So there's a burden and a responsibility there, but we're uniquely positioned as creatives, especially adjacent to developers, to really chase what's new and great. But sometimes what's new and great doesn't actually solve a problem, and we should also
Right.
keep that in mind as we lead and as we follow.
Yeah. So just on that subject of AI, I mean, what do you say to people? Because I mean, there's a lot of people now who are they look at AI and they say, "Oh, AI is going to replace all marketing. It's going to replace all design and all of that. I can just put in and it's going to spit out everything." And what do you say to the people who think, "Oh, this is a great, as you said, this is a silver bullet solution that's going to remove all of this stuff that I don't really understand anyway."
Well, I would say, remember my point on an experience, and as
Mhm.
somebody who's been through maybe a dozen of these market shifts, I can tell them they're half right, but also half wrong.
Mhm.
So the not that anyone feels this way, but the prevailing arrogance to think that it will come in wholesale and replace, hundreds of years of human ingenuity is naive, but it will replace a lot of non-essential and non-effective positions. So my advice to people is take this threat seriously, but also embrace it as a tool. I always believe that AI plus human ingenuity
Yeah.
is always greater than what AI or humans can do alone. So be one of those people that embrace this technology, find the flaws, the inefficiencies, the impracticalities in your practice, and use AI to eliminate those things so you can focus on your core competencies. You're in a much better position to survive this AI front than somebody who's not using it at all, or somebody who uses it as a crutch to outsource their entire job. So I think those who skill upward, those who are the best at what they do, will find comfort in using AI to help get there. And those who are less than essential, those who are maybe production level, entry level, not essential to business functions, may find themselves either having AI coworkers or AI replace them entirely. So we should take this seriously, but also
Mhm.
understand it's an opportunity for the most enterprising of us to use AI to uplift our craft, to sustain our careers. And if we don't, you might find yourself in another industry.
Yes, and absolutely couldn't agree more. And I think it was somebody I interviewed recently, and they were just talking about the impact of AI on sales. And they said, AI won't replace salespeople, but salespeople who use AI will replace salespeople who don't. And
100%.
I think it's exactly the same for
Yep.
creatives and
Love
design,
that quote.
etc.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's really important, to adapt and be kind of an evangelist in some ways. I mean, because there's some of the because you'll find actually in other parts of the organization, that's why they're focusing on these areas of AI, because it's like it's nice, it's over there in marketing or design or creative. That's where AI is making an impact. It's not over here in my area. I think you can show I think you can be in the vanguard of actually being able to show how to adopt and adapt to AI to maybe more reluctant co-workers.
Yeah, and I think although certain industries are more at risk of an AI
Mhm.
revolution, like developers, for
Sure.
example, it's coming for everything and everyone. And
Mhm.
really, we as humans need to decide where that threshold is. Do we want AI to do our job so that we can do laundry, or do we want AI to do laundry so that we can do the fun parts of our job? So we need
Yeah.
to understand what our ethical boundaries are, but nobody should be naive to think, oh, this won't affect me because I run a farm.
Right.
AI
Exactly.
will find a way to be leveraged, if not individually, leadership or business owners will find a way
Mhm.
to revolutionize industries that maybe it doesn't belong in. And I think the cautionary tale here is just because it can doesn't mean
Yeah.
it should. So we really need to
Exactly.
figure out where it's actually adding value and where it's just, again, a solution in search of a problem.
Yeah. And just coming back again to what you mentioned earlier, I just wanted to circle back to it about, when you do move into a leadership position and maybe you are like exposed to areas that you're not familiar with, working in concert with departments that maybe you haven't had a lot of interaction with. What you mentioned earlier, I think, is incredibly important. Like, if you is to go to the head of sales and say, "Can I sit in on some sales calls? Can I sit in on some sales meetings?" I won't say anything; you won't even know I'm there. But
Yep.
just because even the fact of asking will immediately raise your their respect level of you a little bit, because let's face it, especially for groups like sales, they're going to be highly skeptical of somebody coming from a creative background. But the more you show that you want to understand, but I think the heart of the other part then is Vincent, is really educating, say, well, for instance, sales, educating sales on what creative does for them.
Absolutely. And I think as a creative leader and having done it at the highest executive level,
Mhm.
being a relationship builder is probably my most important individual
Mhm.
function. if you're not able to go and have those conversations with the head of marketing and head of sales and the CTO and build those relationships that eventually down the line help your team, you
Mhm.
probably don't belong in this position. And I always approach it from a partnership directive. I'm not here to investigate what you're doing. I'm here to
Mhm.
see how my team and my resources can help you do your job better. That's a great way to approach somebody. And I've never been denied, an encounter when I approach in that direction,
Mhm.
because when we're pitching clients, guess who's there with you? Me. When
Yeah.
we're creating the marketing funnel, guess who's there having to deliver on those promises? Me. When you're building a new website or a new app, guess whose team has to function with you?
Yeah.
It's me. So I would be suspicious if I'm in sales or marketing or these other positions and somebody like me is not talking to you. And I think when you come in with the spirit of partnership and mutual benefit, those doors open and suspicion subsides.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the it's always a bit of humility is always goes a long way, because, like I said, I mean, sometimes you'll have other groups that have preconceived ideas about of your role, and I think the more you can break that down, the better. And as you
Yeah.
said, partnering is incredibly important. Well, listen, Vincent, this has been fantastic. Right, the time has flown by. All of Vincent's information will be below this video. But before we go, please do remind people about what you do.
Absolutely. I'm an executive brand consultant. So I've had a 20-year career in advertising in the highest levels of tech, working on brand design, interactive, everything that you can imagine. I'm also a former agency owner. So I know the business side from the top. I've been in business development for my own pursuits. So I understand sales a little bit more intimately than the average creative. But currently, I'm an executive brand consultant and I work with brands all over the world, helping them with new initiatives, launch new products, build websites, build brands. I'm also the author, as you mentioned earlier, of a new book called The Art of Direction:
Mhm.
Personal Perspectives on the Path to Creative Leadership, where I talk about the skills and mindset shift it takes to enter a leadership position, whether you're a creative or not. I think there's insights there for you. And then I'm also a keynote speaker around the world where I share these insights of my 20-year design career.
Excellent. Well, listen, thanks again, Vincent. Thank you for watching and listening. And I will see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, John.